Well, the book of Esther was recorded not very long after the events it describes, and it was recorded to explain the origins of a Jewish festival called Purim. Now, Jesus would have grown up celebrating this festival every year, joining in with the synagogue readings and the family feasting. And what a story. Beauty treatments and palaces and banquets and gifts. And you should go back and read chapter 1 if you're not familiar, because it has even more opulence and grandeur. This biblical genre is called King's Court drama. It's a bit like the Jane Austen ballrooms for ancient Hebrews. Every generation gets their own version. For you young people today, you get Bridgerton. And look, all power to you. I think it's a pretty good version actually, because all the bullshit's already exposed. But for me, I was born in the 1970s, so I grew up with the 1960s version of this drama. It was called Esther and the King. It was a film. And check out this scene.
Don't think of me as a king in a palace, but as a man who loves you. Who loves you very much. Esther, what are you thinking?
When I was first taken from my village, I hated you with all my heart. But now that I've seen you as you really are, I find the hatred leaving me, and different feelings taking its place. Feelings that could be love.
Wow. Well, in this version, there was no actual night spent with the king. Instead, the king offers Esther a trial period in the palace, and if she doesn't like it, she's allowed to say no to being queen, and she's allowed to go home. Yeah, so fast forward 2 decades, and suddenly I am the mother of a daughter. And I wanted really, really badly to be this kind of mother.
Don't be polite to men who creep you out. Don't be polite to men who creep you out. Don't be polite to them, it's not your job to comfort men. Don't be polite to men who creep you out. Hey!
See, that, Mum, is what is needed when you are growing up a daughter in the 21st century. But instead, somehow, and thank you Hollywood, my daughter Eleanor got her own version of Esther and the King. You might even know it, the 2006 version, and it looked like this.
If it is for sale, my lord, it is not love.
Even you must have a price.
I am neither a buyer nor a seller of love.
Suppose, my lady, a man offered you a more treasured gift. Say, a kingdom.
It's always the music, isn't it?
The only gift I would accept is your heart.
Then it is yours. And you need not serve 7 years to get it. Tell me, Esther, 'Esther, 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 ' Tell me of your people. Teach me of your ways.
Wow. Yeah, and there's a lot of fabric in that one. A lot of fabric, a lot of reading books to the king. I'm not quite sure if there was a night spent with the king, it's unclear. But One Night with the King, that one's called, and my daughter Eleanor loved it. So romantic. She wanted us to keep reading her the book of Esther every night when we did our family Bible reading, and her big brother would eye roll and say, "Not again." But by primary school, she could read it for herself, and she just read it over and over. And then it happened. And I can still picture it because it was one of those profound parenting moments we still talk about as a family. I invited Eleanor to come tonight to help me share it. She couldn't make it, so I'm sharing with her permission. She was 13 years old. She came out of her room holding her Bible, and I could tell from her face something wasn't right. And I asked her what was wrong, and she told me she'd been reading Esther. And then she paused, and I just knew. And I said, "Oh, did you just realise some things?" And she just came up to me and nodded, and I put my arms around her and I gave her a hug, and I thought, oh God, she wants me to fix it. And I just sat down with her and we looked at the Bible together. And I start trying to figure out how much of this Esther story she does now actually really understand. And it seems as if the fact that I had allowed her to just finish reading her first ever serious novel, The Fault in Our Stars, it had really kind of opened her mind to a few things. And she was now bringing this newfound knowledge to her Bible reading. So we read her favourite Bible story again together. But this time, she does not want it sugar-coated. This time we're not in the Jane Austen ballroom. This time, she wants answers. So firstly, we learn that Esther's name is Hadassah. She has a secret Hebrew name, a name that connects her to her people and to her place. Her real name reminds us that she's living in exile, that her people had been captured and forcibly removed from their homes. Then we learn that Hadassah is being raised by her cousin Mordecai because both of her parents have died. Now, if as a mum you want to unsettle your 13-year-old daughter, just remind her that her parents are not immortal. And then after that, we learn that Hadassah was captured by the king's men, taken to the palace and put into the care of a eunuch. So her gap in her 13-year-old knowledge from The Fault in Our Stars didn't cover eunuch, and that was not addressed. Also not addressed were the words harem or concubines. But suddenly, all of the prior glory of this story just fell away. The 12 months of cosmetic treatments and the palace food and the special favour of the king's servants, it wasn't such a fairy tale. My 13-year-old daughter really saw Hadassah for the first time. A beautiful girl, keeping her culture and her faith and even her name a secret, stolen from the care of her cousin and dragged into a world of preparation for sexual slavery. And it didn't matter anymore that verse 17 said, "The king loved Esther more than all the other women." Because the very next verse said, "Of all the virgins, she won his favour." And The Fault in Our Stars had, it seemed, covered really quite adequately what a virgin was, and it also really beautifully explored what it was for a person to choose to give that away. Hadassah did not have that choice. And my daughter rightly needed to know, where was God in this story? Now, tonight's sermon, I've had a bit of a trick on this year. Tonight's sermon is part 1 of a 2-part series. And next week is the part where it's going to cover how God turns this whole sordid affair around. But as I sat on the lounge with my daughter that day, she needed me to address this part of the story. Where was God here in this moment for this poor, young, lonely girl? Well, all year at Luck, we've been hearing stories like this, sermons on passages from the Old Testament, and they're complicated, and they're shocking, and they're terrible. And I had to remind my daughter that these are not the only stories that we read. Our scriptures are a full collection of stories that reveal to us both the depravity of humanity and God's ongoing action of redemption throughout time and space for all nations and people across all lands, far and wide. The God of the scriptures is a God who loves and is a God who saves. But I've learned through my years of growing up in church that we do incredible damage if we don't tell the stories of the women in our scriptures honestly. In Esther's story, there is a danger that we might rush too quickly to the ending and fail to let our minds just sit right here with Hadassah's loss and fear and with the obvious question of where is God in all of this? But when we do pause here at the end of chapter 2, Hadassah's story helps us to see that sometimes all we have to work with are messy, complex stories before the justice and the goodness can ever come. Time and time again, the women on the pages of our Bible take the mess and the dirt and they make something holy. Something that can feel like resurrection or liberation or redemption. This year we've heard sermons about the mother of Moses, about Leah, about Rahab, about Bathsheba. These were the stories that Jesus grew up with, hearing them read in the temple. More than that, these were the stories that Jesus birthed with God and the Spirit before his incarnation. These were the stories that shaped his life as he walked on this earth. As Jesus walked with his disciples, he spent a lot of time with women who had complicated stories. He made room for them. He paid attention to the things that they didn't even say, like how many coins they put into the bowl, or what time of the day they came to the well. Jesus held space for these women. He validated their complicated and difficult stories before bringing them hope and light and new life in him. And their new lives in him did not always change their circumstances too much, but it changed the way they lived through their circumstances, time and time again. Imagine Jesus reading the scroll of Esther during the festival of Purim, sitting with his friends, feasting and celebrating and remembering the faithful deliverance of God's people that you're going to hear about in next week's sermon. And he might have paused at the end of chapter 2, just like we have tonight. And he might have looked up and caught the gaze of many of the women who are now following him, who are now sitting around his table, who would call him teacher. He might have looked them in the eye and shared with them that deep sense of knowing that while Esther is right now crowned as queen, she didn't grow up in a palace. Very few of us did. And yet, sitting around Jesus' table are women and men, people who have been changed. They will never, ever be the same again. And what they will go on to become, the kind of impact they will have on the entire world and on all of human history from that time on, is not yet imaginable to them. Esther, the queen, did not know that the day was coming when she had to be prepared to become Esther the martyr. Right now, she's queen, but her road to this point was filled with injustice and violence and cruelty and exploitation. Look closely though, because throughout the early part of the story, we do see a few important things. The constant love and devotion of her cousin Mordecai. We see the care and kindness of the king's eunuch, Haggai. We see Esther's own wisdom developing as she makes careful choices about how to come before the king and what she should bring. And for Esther, it will be this wisdom and careful diplomacy that she uses to navigate the rules and structures of the king's court. Her careful awareness of her context and the agency that she creates from within her circumstances. These are what informs what she does next. This agency is what she takes and cultivates and uses to make a difference in her world, to fight against injustice and to stand up for what is right when the time comes. And this, friends, is what it still looks like today to be a follower and a disciple of the living God.